What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. And today I have another video for you, and it's going to be regarding our Babyhawk II HD, our brand new product. And this is going to be for you guys out there that want to know how to set it up, get the VTX working with your DJI goggles, and also how to bind the DJI FPV controller to the Babyhawk. So without further ado, let's hop right into the video. So the first thing you want to do is get yourself a computer. We're going to need this to use the DJI FPV assistant to go ahead and get all of our components onto the same firmware and get it all bound together. And I'm gonna go ahead and put a link down below where you can download that, get that downloaded and set up on your computer, and then you're gonna have to go ahead and connect each of your components to the DJI assistant. And it's super important to make sure that each component is on the same firmware, because if you have an older firmware on, say, your goggles and a newer one on the drone, that may cause some issues that you don't want to encounter, such as maybe your VTX is in low power mode and it won't come out of low power mode, and that could be because it's not on the same firmware. So once you have the DJI Assistant downloaded and the app is open up on your computer, we're going to go ahead and connect the Babyhawk II HD to it. And in order for it to connect to the DJI Assistant, the drone is actually going to have to be powered on. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in our lipo battery. And as soon as I plug in the lipo battery, I'm gonna take a USB Type-C cable, and you could use the one that came with your DJI goggles, or I have a GoPro, so I'm using the GoPro cable. Whatever USB Type-C cable you have, you can use. So go ahead and plug it into the side of the Vista unit, and then you're gonna go ahead and plug it into your computer. And you'll notice that there's a little image here showing you that it's actually connected to the computer itself, and then the DJI FPV air unit light comes up, and you're going to want to go ahead and connect that. And since I've already been flying this drone, I already activated it earlier, so you'll probably get that message first saying that, hey, what's your email, what's your DJI email, if you don't have one, make one, and then it'll ask you to activate the unit, and you're going to want to go ahead and do that. Once you've activated the unit, you're going to want to go ahead and download the latest version of the DJI firmware onto the Vista unit. And it looks like I have already downloaded the latest version, so I'm actually going to just show you. I'm going to do an example. I'm going to downgrade, I'm going to start update, and kind of show you what the process is of how the DJI Assistant will upgrade your firmware for you. It even tells you right here, avoid touching the air unit during this update as temperatures will increase, and make sure that you're in a well ventilated area, or maybe having a fan blow on it just so it doesn't overheat. Now, after it's all said and done and updated, make sure you keep in mind of which firmware you're on. It's going to be the latest and greatest, which is 1.00.6 or something like that. Now we're going to go ahead, and after we have the drone updated, we're going to set that aside. And let's go ahead and do the exact same thing with your goggles and make sure that they're on the same exact firmware. So just like before, you're going to want to make sure that the unit is powered up. And then you're going to go ahead and plug it in with the USB Type-C cable. Now this time it says DJI FPV goggles. Go ahead and click on that. And mine, since I've been flying already, are on the latest firmware. If you just got them brand new out of the box, you're going to want to make sure to upgrade it to the latest firmware, which is version 1.00.06. And then lastly, you're going to want to go ahead, if you're using the DJI FPV controller, you're going to want to make sure that that is on the exact same firmware as well. So go ahead and power the controller on and plug it in with the cable into your computer, and open up the DJI FPV remote controller. And this one also is on the most current version. So I'm all good, they're all activated, and they're all on the exact same firmware. So we can go ahead and go to the next step, which is going to be binding the goggles and the transmitter to the drone itself. First, I'm going to go ahead and start with binding the goggles. And some people say you should have the drone on in binding mode before the goggles. Some people say you should have the goggles on, put it in binding mode before the drone. That's the way I usually like to do it. So I'm going to power on the goggles, and then you'll see right next to where the power inlet is, there's a little orange button, and you want to go ahead and press that with something. And as soon as you press it, you'll hear it start to beep. And then next, you'll go ahead and power on the drone and then hit the bind button. And on the bind button for the Vista, it's right next to the USB Type-C port. You'll see a little button. You don't actually need anything to push it, like tweezers or anything. You should be able to push it with your finger. So I'm gonna do that. Go ahead and power on the drone and hit that bind button. And after you tap the bind button, you'll see the light on the unit go to red and back to green, and then you'll hear the goggles do another beep confirming that they are bound together. So our goggles and our drone are now bound together. So we're gonna move on to our transmitter and get that bound up to the unit itself. So I'm gonna go ahead and unplug everything for a minute here, unplug my goggles, set the goggles aside. And now we're gonna move on to the transmitter and get this in bind mode and bind it to our drone. So in order to do that, you're gonna wanna go ahead and power on your transmitter. And then you're gonna wanna click and hold the record button on the left, the scroll wheel on the right, and then the button right here, which I believe may be like a return to home or something like that, next to your power button. And as soon as you hold all three of those down, you should be able to hear it tone into bind mode. There it is. And it will start beeping, and we're gonna do the exact same thing with the drone. Power on the drone, wait until it boots up, and then hit the bind button, which is next to the USB Type-C connector. Now go ahead and hold the button, let go, and you'll get the confirmation tones from the controller stating that your Vista unit is bound to the DJI controller. Now, the next thing before we hop into beta flight and make sure that our controller is working properly, you're gonna wanna go ahead and check your Vista unit and see if the TX and the ground wires are actually soldered to the flight controller. So the pads you're gonna be looking for is towards the back of the unit. You're gonna look at the Vista and look all the way to the right, and there should be a ground wire all the way to the right on that pad, and then right next to it there should be a TX wire. And some of our units actually did not come with this from the factory, so you're gonna have to solder that on if you got a plug and play version of this drone. So go ahead and get yourself a little bit of wire for the ground and for the TX pad, and you're gonna solder the ground to a ground on the flight controller, and then the TX wire from the Vista is gonna go to the S-Bus pad on the flight controller. Now after you do that, you're gonna wanna go over to EMAX USA, and once here, you're gonna wanna go to the top where it says customer support, and then you're gonna wanna go to our knowledge base, and this is where we're gonna grab and download the CLI command so we can upload it to the drone so all the settings are correct for the DJI FPV transmitter. Now you can hop back over to Betaflight and plug in your drone via USB cable. And then go ahead and hit connect up at the top right. And then you can go down to the CLI tab and then hit load from file. And this is where you're gonna load the CLI command for the Babyhawk. You're gonna let that run, and once that's done running, it should reboot your drone. And then we're just gonna make sure that our transmitter is working properly how it should. So go ahead and plug in your drone and make sure your propellers are off. And then turn on your transmitter. Once it boots up, it'll beep letting you know it's connected, and we're gonna go down to the receiver tab. And there you have it, the drone is working with your DJI system. So now we have everything on the same firmware, the controller bound, the goggles bound, and it arms and everything. Now before I end this video, there's a couple of tips I want to give you before you go up and start flying your Babyhawk II HD. And the first tip is going to be with this battery cable right here, you're going to want to go ahead and take a zip tie and actually attach it to the standoff right here. That way if you crash or the battery shifts, you're not going to be yanking the pads on the flight controller itself. That's going to be the first tip. And the second tip is if you're running a GoPro, you're going to want to make sure to use PID Profile 2. We actually tuned it a little bit different to fly the GoPro so it flies a little bit better. So make sure you use PID Profile 2. So that's it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it and you found it useful. If you guys have any suggestions of what videos I should do next, make sure to put them in the comments below, and make sure to hit that subscribe notification bell. That way when we put more videos up like this, you guys are notified and you can stay up to date. Well guys, until the next one, I'll see you guys later.